All right, welcome in. Cube Show podcast, college football podcast, usually comes to you on Sunday. I apologize for not being able to do that much recently. Probably not going to happen until UFL season is over. And honestly, once we get to the fall, it's going to be tough to get this in anyway with the extra two games, two teams, sometimes being extra two games just by the end of the day on Sunday. We're going to try and we're going to keep doing it because we know you want more college football content on Sundays. We've been bringing you our SEC team reviews. We're going to get away from that. Kind of take a halftime from that this week. We'll come back to it, begin again next week. We will get to every team. We're going to do every team, talk about every team, break them down, kind of post-spring, review what the spring game was, what they did in the different players. But today I want to take a little different twist. I had a topic kind of fall in my lap a little bit, and I want to focus in on it because I think it makes for some intriguing conversation. And I want your feedback as well. So hit us in the comments on where you think some of these statistical leaders will go. We're going to focus on offenses in the SEC. And when you think about the amount of guys that are coming into the league at different positions, it's intriguing to me to go back and look at who is going to lead the league in rushing, who's going to lead the league in passing, who's going to lead the league in receptions, receiving yards. So we'll take a look at a few of those today. I'm going to give you some of my predictions. Saw Connor O'Gara doing some of this, so I kind of stole it from him. Thanks for the idea, Connor. Love his stuff over at Saturday Down South. We hit it on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. So I kind of got Greg's input on it a little bit, and Damian and Saber kind of seeing what they thought about it. And we'll go through it again here today because I want to hear what you guys think of it. I want to hear your thoughts, and we'll just kind of go through some of the hows and whys. As you guys know, each and every week, brought to you by Wickles Pickles, wickedly delicious. We've always got them on stock. We've always got them here. They should have them in your grocery store. If not, wickles.com. You can grab them there. If you can't find them in your grocery store, you need to tell them, get some Wickles Pickles in here, man, because we'll buy them. Use them for snacks. You got ingredients with them. Go to @Wickles Pickles on Instagram. You can see everything that they have. They got a lot of cool, like different ways you can use them as ingredients, different recipes that you can use Wickles for, and they're absolutely fantastic. So we were talking earlier this week about the lady that's doing the pickles and the Dr. Pepper, and I was like, well, if it's Wickles, I might. So there you go. All right, SEC passing leaders. Interesting to look back at last season. And I think if you were to go look at the SEC passing leaders from a year ago, probably, I think some people would know who led the league in passing yards. I don't know if everybody would. Your Heisman Trophy winner did not lead the SEC in passing yards. Carson Beck did. And I do think that he would be the default for most people to go to who would lead the SEC in passing yards this season. It's not a bad choice. He's going to have a lot of good weapons. He's going to be a top 5 pick, and he's going to have a pretty good offensive line. I know he doesn't have Brock Bowers, but I think that what else they're going to have, it's going to be pretty easy for him to have that caliber of a season. Now, one thing that I found interesting when looking up these numbers was who was second in the SEC in passing touchdowns. That was not Carson Beck. He was third with 24. Now, Jaden Daniels led the way with 40, and Jaden Daniels obviously led the SEC in total yards. But who was second in the SEC in passing touchdowns? I know there's a lot of good guesses that are going to come out of this, and you're going to say, well, it's Jalen Milroe, right? Oh, no, maybe it was, I don't know, Brady Cook, Graham Mertz. Wrong again. Jackson Dart, Ole Miss, had to be, right? He's got all those weapons, had a lot of fun. No. Devin Leary was second in the SEC in passing touchdowns last year at Kentucky. 25 on the season. Now, he also led the SEC in interceptions with 12, so he worked against that number a little bit with the times that he turned the football over. So who's going to lead the SEC in passing yards this year? I kicked this around a lot of different ways. Could I see Carson Beck doing it? Yes, I could. Absolutely. Could I see I could almost make a case for Graham Mertz. I think that could happen. If they're in a bunch of tight games and they have to go to the air a little bit more, the reason that I'd go against it is I don't know if he has the weaponry to be able to do that, and Billy's going to want a balanced offense. I think Nico Iamaleava could easily do this. He's going to have great weapons on the perimeter. He's going to have a really good offensive line if they stay healthy. You guys heard the Tennessee spring review last week. He's a guy that's going to get the opportunities down the field to be able to put up big chunks of yardage. And if they're in a couple of tight games as well later in the season, he might have to do more with his arm. I just think that they're going to be a run-first offense still. I know people see it and see what it is and see the speed, the tempo, and the formations. But I think they're going to want to run the football first still. And I think he may actually take some yards away from himself on the ground at times. I know they're not going to live there, but I think he's got a chance to do that. I don't see Jalen Milroe being that kind of a quarterback this year. I don't think they have the perimeter weapons. I think Jeremy Bernard's a great ad. but I don't think they have that takeover guy that's going to allow him to put up those kind of passing yards. I think they're going to use his legs. I think they want to be balanced. I think they're going to have at least a good middle of that offensive line and a good stable of backs are going to try to run the football, be a pretty balanced offense. I think Kalen kind of wants it that way and knows that they don't have the kind of receivers that he had at Washington for Mike Penix last year. And we'll see if Jalen can be that accurate of a passer in that style offense for them to go that route. I don't think it happens. Brady Cook, maybe. We love Luther Burden, love his tight ends. And I think it's possible. Once again, when we get later in this discussion on some other numbers, I think you'll understand why I'm probably not going Brady Cook. But I do think he could be there. I don't think Peyton Thorne can be that guy. When you think about Brock at Kentucky, he's got the receivers, man. It's like we haven't seen those receivers be consistent enough yet. Good tight end room, offensive line a little We'll get to Kentucky in a couple of weeks, the spring review there. I don't know if that one's really going to happen. Connor Wigman at A&M, good receivers. Offensive line, I don't really know what that thing's going to look like. But I think that he can put up some good numbers. I just think that offense is still going to be kind of downhill first under Colin Klein. So I don't really see him as sort of being that guy. I don't think there's a transfer in that I'm going to look at and say, oh, he can come in, take over, and maybe be that guy. I think Garrett Nussmeier is interesting. Now, Kyron Lacey, and you go add a big play receiver from Liberty that I think CJ Daniel's going to come in and be able to help you. The receivers won't be the problem. You got a great tight end, maybe the best offensive line in the SEC. I just think some of the inconsistencies from Garrett Nussmeier, I mean, he's throwing those moon balls down the field. I don't think your completion percentage is going to be where it is going to be for some other folks' deep balls, throwing it like that. He's still going to be a little bit of a risk taker. He's that gunslinger mentality type guy. So I think that sort of prevents him from being that. And if that offensive line is as good as advertised, I know they don't have that guy coming back at tailback. I think they're still going to be balanced. They're still going to run the football a pretty decent amount because they'll have the bodies to be able to go out there and do it. Leave me yours and who you think's going to do it. Like Jackson Arnold, I think has the talent to do it. I think he's got good weapons, but I'm not really sure the offensive line is going to be there, and they're probably going to have to throw the ball a lot to be in some games. I think their defense can be solid. But I just don't know if he's going to have enough time, enough offensive line to just sit back there and pick teams apart and be able to lead this league in passing this year. I don't see that happening for him. And plus, he's technically first-year starter, so you expect a few bumps in the roads. I'm going to go Quinn Ewers, Texas. And I don't think that his options are maybe to the caliber top to bottom as they were a year ago. But I think he's still got some pretty good weapons, man. And I think he's still going to be somebody that could go out and lead the SEC in passing yards. The thing that I like about Sark is how balanced he is. He's not going to have to focus in on one guy. Can it be a Devonta Smith if that's the guy you want to find matchups for? Sure, but he doesn't have to be. I think they'll spread it around a little bit more. Nye Black's going to help. Isaiah Bond's going to help. Matthew Golden's going to help. You get Silas Bolden, who's an awesome slot receiver from Oregon State. And they should have a good offensive line to be able to protect. And keep in mind, remember, we've told you this before, motion-based matchup offense. Sark's going to want to move those pieces around, take the best matchup he can find, and then hit that individual. And I think yours, with another offseason, some more time to grow, they'll probably use a little bit more of the intermediate stuff as an extension of the run game, and that'll count for him as passing yards. Now, CJ Baxter could take a lot of those away. It's feasible. It's possible. But I think against that offensive line, people are probably going to try to come maybe take that away first. So we'll see how defenses play them. We'll see how Sark tries to line it up, move the pieces around to get the matchups he wants. But I'm going to go Quinn Ewers. And I just think he has the ability. He's got the deep ball accuracy. He's got the weapons to be able to do it. I'll take Quinn Ewers leading the SEC in passing yards. The number one reason that I did not go Carson Beck here was because I think Georgia is going to be in control of a lot of their football games, and they're not going to have to be that kind of a team. He's not going to have to put the ball in the air much. And you can say they were in control of their games last year, but one, you had a Brock Bowers you wanted to get the ball to. You're playing a wide receiver and Dylan Bell at tailback half the time. They're not going to have that problem with ATN coming in. I think they'll have some of those younger backs are going to be ready to get more meaningful carries. I think that takes away a little bit from from Carson Beck maybe leading the SEC in passing. But I also think there could be a push for a Heisman, and maybe you try to get him the numbers, and that's feasible. You look at that Texas schedule is one thing that, I mean, it's all these schedules are going to be tough, but you get Colorado State and then at Michigan. UTSA lost their best pass rusher to Texas. ULM, the Mississippi State defense, has taken some big hits. a week off before Oklahoma. So outside of that Michigan game, which is going to be filthy and going to be nasty, and that's another reason because I don't think even that Texas offensive line is going to be able to manage that Michigan defensive line. So it's going to have to be more Quinn Ewers in that game. And you'll have a couple of teams down the stretch where I think you'll be able to put the ball in the air and have some success. So again, I'll go Quinn Ewers to lead the SEC in passing yards. Really interesting question is who leads the SEC in rushing yards. And there's so much more nowadays, it feels like, that comes into play here. It used to just be who was the biggest, baddest back. Was it Carnell Williams? Was it Todd Gurley? Was it Darren McFadden? Did you have a Rudy Johnson? Whatever it was, that used to be sort of the key. Well, now offensive line, I do feel like, has a little bit more to do with it. Do you have a mobile quarterback that's going to take some carries away? How does your offense operate? Like, one of the reasons I think when we're going to talk about who's going to lead the SEC in rushing yards, and some of the people are going to look at it and say, well, I know pretty easy who's been towards the top of the SEC rushing leaders the last few years. It's going to be, whoever's out there doing it from Tennessee. And I would say, well, problem with Tennessee is you got a chance to get a different back trapped in the game in that offense. And that can take carries away from somebody that maybe could go out there and get it done. SEC rushing leaders last year. This is pretty interesting to just kind of go back and think about. Cody Schrader led the league in rushing. Jaden Daniels was actually next. The leading returning rusher in the Southeastern Conference, who will be playing for the same team, is actually Jarquez Hunter at Auburn. He was sixth in the SEC in rushing yards last year with 909 yards. So could be simply you go to Jarquez Hunter. Well, the passing game should be a step ahead this year with what you've brought in at wide receivers from Georgia State, Penn State, true freshman Cam Coleman. That should take a step ahead for Peyton Thorne and maybe take away from a little bit of the rushing yards. And we saw Peyton Thorne be a little bit dangerous with his legs late in the season last year also. That might hurt a little bit. You continue to go down the list, though. Quinshon Judkins is out. Ray Davis is out. Jalen Wright's out. Dajuan Edwards at Georgia is out. Jace McClellan is out. Trevor Etienne goes from Florida to Georgia. He's one we'll have a conversation about. Now, Montrell Johnson was the 10th leading rusher in the SEC last year. I think you can make a case for him. The reason that you would say no is teams are probably going to try to stack that run early with Florida not having a ton of known commodities on the outside. He's also not a home run hitter. I love Montrell Johnson. I think he's a hell of a back. I love watching him run. I think he runs with authority. I think he runs hard, runs mean. But is he dynamic enough to be able to lead this league in rushing yards? I would say probably not. Logan Diggs not going to go early at Ole Miss. He would split carries if he was there anyway. He would be 11th. Then you got Jaquavius Marks, Woody Marks from Mississippi State's going to USC. Kendall Milton's out. Mario Anderson's transferring out. So he's gone. Then you get Dylan Sampson at 15. So I think that's 3 of the top 15 rushers in the Southeastern Conference. They're going to be back on the same teams in the league this year. Now, I think Dylan Sampson's an interesting one because, number one, I think, as we stated last week in our Tennessee spring review, you can go find that YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, that I think there's a pretty significant drop-off there. So he may get more of the work as how it's been split between Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, et cetera, the last few years. He may be the feature guy. You have a quarterback that's going to break teams down with his legs. The tight end room is going to be pretty good. So maybe more of the intermediate passing game helps there a little bit, but it's also going to help the run game. And that offensive line's got to stay healthy. If they get dinged up, I think that subtracts what you're going to be able to do on the ground. Plus, you got some pretty good weapons on the perimeter, which is going to take away from the rushing attack. And like I stated earlier, there's a chance that you get trapped on the bench or on the sideline when that team goes tempo and somebody else is in the game. I think there's a real possibility. I wouldn't push back on anybody who says Dylan Sampson can lead the SEC in rushing yards. I think it's very feasible, very possible. I'm just going to go a little bit of a different direction. Now, there's other guys that you could look at here and say that you could make an easy case for that we didn't get to in those top 15. I think there's plenty of backs that you would look at, like Etienne at Georgia. Now, I just don't know if he's going to be featured enough and they want to give him that many carries to go be that guy in the league this year. You look back last year, what ATM was able to do, he did show good durability. He hasn't been beat up, 131 carries, 753 yards, 8 touchdowns. But I think you want to save a little bit of that juice to make sure you have the explosive sustainability later in the season and not kind of run him into the ground. Also, Carson Beck's going to be able to manage things, get you out of things, utilize tight ends in the intermediate stuff. They're going to be really good in the slot, especially with bringing London Humphreys in from Vanderbilt. So you'll have some of the quicker, easier throws that can extend the run game. I just don't know if you're going to turn and feed him the ball enough for him to actually lead the league in rushing. Now, could you go Rocket Sanders at South Carolina? I love Rocket Sanders. I think he has that game breaker capability. One, he's got to be healthy. Availability for him is going to be big. I don't know if he's going to be there and be in the lineup long enough to be able to do it, but I probably wouldn't go Rocket Sanders because of the offensive line prowess that's gone. You got some young talent coming back. Tight end, not going to be the same. You have a new quarterback that you're breaking in that's not throwing the ball to a first rounder. That's going to allow people to populate the box and probably going to keep that from happening. Now, maybe Lenore Sellers goes out and he's throwing darts and he can tuck it down and carry it as well. And that protects the backside, which removes people for Rocket Sanders to be able to have more space to operate. And he gets up and gets going. I'm just not sure I see it. Jarquez Hunter easily could be that guy. I think Jarquez Hunter has the ability to obviously miss a couple of games early last season, has breakaway speed, home run hitting ability. I think they're going to roll those backs a little bit. I think you'll see more two back for Auburn this year. And like we said, they're going to do a little bit more through the air. So I'm not necessarily sure that happens. Had a lot of people say they think one of the Alabama backs. Well, first off, if you're telling me to take one of two backs on a team, that guy's probably not going to lead the league in rushing because they're going to split the carries. I think Jam Miller is going to be great. Been hearing about him for over a year and a half now. Justice Haynes is your bigger, more physical bruiser. Yeah, he's going to be able to get it done. I have a little concern about the tackle position. You have good tight ends to be able to help, but you have a quarterback that ran for over 500 yards last year. What's he going to do this year? And not just scrambling, leaving the pocket, but by design as well. That's going to take a little bit away from those backs. So I'm not sure that I would want to go that direction either. Ulysses Bentley at Ole Miss is a very interesting thought. But now you're bringing back Henry Parrish. We've told you about the running back that they've gone and gotten from Nevada. I think that kid can come in and play as well. You almost have a crowded running back room there in Oxford and a quarterback that can tuck it down and keep it at times. So I just think the wealth will be spread a little bit too much at Ole Miss. I think Bentley has the breakaway capabilities to do it. And I actually think he's more physical than people give him credit for. He's also been dinged up a little bit. So do you want to try to save him for some sort of a playoff run and not run him into the ground and utilize your other backs? Plus the tempo thing kind of works with them a little bit as well. It's an interesting thought, and it's an interesting back and forth because I think there's a lot of different players on a lot of different teams that could potentially pull this off. You got a big back from Ohio State coming into Kentucky. What's the offense going to look like first and foremost? I need to know how much ground and pound you're going to want to be. I need to know what that offensive line is going to look like. I can't be super confident in that group right now with what I've seen from the last 2 years and a lot of the same bodies that are going to be in there. I love Wolford going back, and I think the OC is going to be fine, but I need to see it a little bit more before I think you're going to be that kind of a group. So Chip Trayanum, not as dynamic as Ray Davis. I'm going to go to Missouri. And I will offset this by understanding right away that Nate Noel could absolutely steal this thing. He could absolutely take it away from Marcus Carroll. And a lot of you are saying, who in the hell is Marcus Carroll? Put the Georgia State film on from last year, and you'll see a kid that has tree trunks for quads, breakaway speed, physicality that you want, and the understanding of how to get north and south in his own scheme. Now, Nate Noel has been running the stretch play a little bit more, whereas where Cody Schrader made his money last year, I just don't know. And listen, Nate Noel actually hasn't been as beat up as a guy his size as you would think. And he's the one that could steal this by having some of the 60, 80, 40-yard runs on a semi-consistent basis. But Marcus Carroll, I think, is going to be the workhorse. And yes, you lose Javon Foster at left tackle, but I think you got a really good group of tight ends. You got the core of that offensive line back. And keep in mind, you have an offensive coordinator in Kirby Moore that just knows how to find and create space with movement, be it post-snap, pre-snap, shifts, different formations. Plus, you have a quarterback that can pull him down and run it. And Luther Burden's going to get so much attention, I think you're going to be able to steal some yards on the ground, regardless of who's getting or keeping the football. But I love Marcus Carroll in this offense. I love the attention that some of the other guys are going to be able to get. The only knock on this for me personally is that I think Nate Noel could have a couple of big runs throughout the course of the year that prevent him from leading the SEC in rushing. But I'm going to go Marcus Carroll at Missouri as the SEC's leading rusher this upcoming season. You guys know who the leader is in denim. It's Blue Delta Jeans. custom fit denim just for you. Breathable, stretchy, comfortable. You can dress them up. You can dress them down, go casual. You're not going to need 4 or 5 pairs of jeans. Get one from Blue Delta and you are ready to go. Graduation's here. Father's Day coming up. Get a gift card at bluedeltajeans.com. They can be fit digitally. Have them sent to your doorstep and you will not regret it. You will never want another pair of jeans. I promise you. Go to bluedeltajeans.com today. Tell them you heard about them right here on Cube Show. All right, so who leads the league in receiving? This is all over the place. This was very difficult for me. This was very difficult for anybody else that I've had this conversation with. You just go through the talent at that position that is coming into this league, or dare I say, just moving across this league. Isaiah Bonds going to Texas from Alabama. London Humphreys, Vanderbilt to Georgia. Don't sleep on that kid. Really good football player. Juice Wells, I thought was a number 1 receiver in the league going into last season. Didn't stay healthy at South Carolina. Now he's going to be at Ole Miss. Colby Young can play. Miami transfer going to Georgia. You've got C.J. Daniels, who we mentioned earlier, going from Liberty to LSU. Deion Burks is a spark plug, man. Like, he's got real juice going from Purdue to Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold's going to be able to use him short, intermediate passes that he can turn into explosive plays and get him down the field. Matthew Golden, Houston receivers now at Texas. We mentioned his name. The list kind of goes on and on. Keandre Lambert-Smith at Auburn. I don't think he's tweaked up enough to actually lead the league in receiving yards or receptions, but we're just going to focus in on receiving yards right now and talk about guys that we think could pull this off. Chris Brazzell from Tulane is another one that I think you could easily go out there and say he could lead the SEC in receiving yards. But I go to the schedule and kind of back to one of the reasons that I think that Marcus Carroll leads the SEC in rushing yards. Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt. Missouri's going to have things figured out before they take a week off and play A&M, which will be the best defensive line that they play. Then they get Auburn, whose defensive line I have concerns about. Alabama, who's playing a new defense. Oklahoma, tough. South Carolina, who I will say, the defensive line, don't sleep on them, a little better than people think. Mississippi State's defense, meh. Arkansas's defense, don't really know what to anticipate just yet. So you can load up on the front end, get your act together for some of your tougher games, and then I think stack up some more yards on the back end. Similar for what I think is going to happen for our SEC receiving yards leader in 2024. Ole Miss opens up with Furman, Middle Tennessee, at Wake, Georgia Southern, Kentucky, whose secondary should be pretty sporty, and then you're at South Carolina. That secondary's got a bunch of veterans back, by the way. And the SEC's leading returning tackler on the team that he played for a year ago is Debo Williams right there at South Carolina. So then they're at LSU, which does LSU just solve their defensive problems? I don't know. We'll do this on defense in another episode. We focus in on that. Then they go Oklahoma at Arkansas, Georgia at home, at Florida, and Mississippi State. The opportunity for Ole Miss to put up a lot of yards is going to be there. Now, here's the problem with taking anybody on this offense leading anything in anything. And that includes Jackson Dart leading the league in passing yards, which is totally feasible. It includes Ulysses Bentley leading the SEC in rushing yards. It includes maybe a Juice Wells leading the SEC in receptions or receiving yards. You're also going to have Caden Priestcorn that's going to be able to move around and work a little bit there. The weapons and the weaponry are going to be endless for Ole Miss this season. So a quarterback that can pull the ball down, multiple backs that can hurt you in a couple of different ways, and targets all over the place. Aiden Williams is the freshman that everybody was raving about last year. He's going to be back, kind of a red zone 50-50 ball guy. Jordan Watkins is going to be back that can work the slot. So I think still, after all that is said and done, Trey Harris leads the SEC in receiving yards. Big physical wide receiver that we've seen the catch and run be successful with. We've seen him take a hitch or an out, make a move, stiff arm a guy, and turn it into a bigger play. But more importantly, down the field, going up over DBs and being able to pull those balls in and get explosive plays that way. I think Juice Wells will be used in the middle of the field and underneath just a little bit more because he's kind of rugged like that. And then some of the attention that's going to have to go to the run game, whether it's your quarterback pulling it or Bentley or another back, is going to keep one-on-one coverage on the outside for Trey Harris. And go back to the first few games of the year last year and look at how Lane Kiffin kind of tried to dial things in. And he was that piece that he wanted to design things for in that offense. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. He's not as individually matchup based as Sark is as much, but I mean, go back and look at what Elijah Moore did in that offense. I mean, they were dialing it up for him that year. It can be kind of spread the wealth, or I think it can be we're going to find a way to match this guy up the way that we want him to, bringing somebody into the backfield and motioning them back out like they did with Moore. The tight end piece is one that they can usually find a lot of mismatches for, and they're going to use, which is why Priestcorn is one of the most important players in the SEC this year, and him staying healthy is key to Ole Miss having the success that I think they're going to have on offense. But I'm going to take Trey Harris. He is a tireless worker. He is a big, physical, capable body, and they are going to want to take these shots down the field. And based on everything else this offense is going to have, I think those shots are going to open up. There's a lot of players I know I didn't miss. There's a lot of guys that you probably think I'm stupid for not talking about, and that's fine because we could go on for days and days and days about all the different guys in this league that could lead in passing, in rushing, or in receiving yards. It's going to be a fun year, and I think just this practice of us talking about it kind of shows you how many big-time players there are and how excited we should probably be for what's coming up this season in the Southeastern Conference. Please go subscribe. We're almost at 10,000. We're close. We're like 200 away when I'm recording this, if not less than 200. We can get there. Pate's even tweeting out that he wants credit for it. That's fine. If we get there, I'll give Josh Pate credit for it. But by God, we got to get there first before anybody gets any credit for anything. I always appreciate the comments. I appreciate the feedback. You guys are an awesome audience. iTunes, Spotify, please hit that 5-star review. Please subscribe. If you're on YouTube and you disagree or you agree or just want to throw your thoughts in there, I'd love to see it in the comments. Let me know what you think. You can tweet us at Cube Show, and you can also go find us on Instagram and see some different content there at Cube Show as well. We'll be back next week. We'll get back into our spring reviews. Keep in mind the schedules are going to be wonky. UFL's throwing me off, but we're going to be back next week.